Have you ever wondered what your life would be like if fate had decided otherwise? It's a question many prefer to shy away from. No one wants to see the monster lurking in the depths of their consciousness reflected back at them. It's like a portal into the darkest corners of the soul. And the horror lies not in the existence of this portal, but in how easily it can be opened. Imagine an ordinary day, work, home, the usual routine. Everything seems predictable, even a little boring. But suddenly, something changes. The moral foundations upon which the world rests begin to crumble. What happens if the accepted norms that define your behavior lose their power? Will you be able to maintain the nobility, honesty, and virtue that you so value in yourself? Or will the dark, primal side that you so carefully suppress break free, revealing to the world a version of yourself that you never suspected existed? Today, the author invites the reader to journey into the depths of human nature, into a dark space where light barely penetrates and shadows take on sinister shapes. It's a dive into the vulnerability of moral principles, into the part of the personality that is usually hidden behind a facade of manners and politeness. And while many prefer to think of evil as some external force, the domain of others, the truth is much more frightening. Evil doesn't just exist outside, it nests within each of us, lurking in the depths of the subconscious, waiting for the opportune moment. This is not a cause for despair, but rather a stark warning. Every person is much closer to the fatal line than they realize, to losing themselves in the depths of the entity they fear most. Today, we will explore the reasons that drive this fall, how harmless decisions can turn into chains that drag us down, and how the environment can transform a personality beyond recognition. Be prepared, because this journey is not going to be easy. There will be no perfect heroes or unambiguous villains, only ordinary people waging a relentless battle with their own inner darkness. And in conclusion, the author intends to ask a disturbing question that cannot be ignored: if the reader found themselves on the edge of the abyss, would they have the strength to retreat, or would they inevitably fall? Before moving on to the main topic of today's discussion, I would like to share a cautionary tale. It's not just a fictional story, but rather a reflection that can highlight aspects of our personality that we may not want to acknowledge. Listen carefully, because the lessons contained within will serve as our guide throughout the rest of the journey. Imagine a dark, piercingly cold night, the kind that seems to swallow any glimmer of light. Carlos, a middle-aged man, around 35, was returning home after an exhausting day at work. The deserted streets were silent, broken only by the measured echo of his footsteps reverberating off the wet asphalt. There was something oppressive in the atmosphere, a tension that made him breathe faster, although he couldn't explain the reason for this feeling. Suddenly, turning a corner, he witnessed the following scene: under the dim light of a street lamp, a man lay motionless. Carlos's first reaction was instantaneous: he froze. From a distance, he watched the stranger, torn between the desire to approach and the urge to simply walk by. Maybe he's just drunk, flashed through his mind, but something told him that wasn't the case. The stranger remained completely still, as if the cold had frozen him between life and death. Carlos felt a lump rise in his throat, and, gathering his courage, he took a few hesitant steps forward, a heavy premonition growing in his soul. As he approached, he noticed that the stranger's clothes were torn to shreds, as if he had been involved in a fierce fight. Carlos's hands were trembling, and he couldn't tell what was causing it, the piercing cold or the animal fear that had gripped his body. Finally, he knelt down and timidly touched the stranger's shoulder. Suddenly, as if jolted by an electric shock, the man threw his head up. His face was distorted not by physical pain from his wounds, but by a grimace in which there was nothing human, a burning mixture of unbridled rage, primal terror, and something else, indefinable, that Carlos couldn't even name. Before he could recover, the stranger muttered something indistinct, like a whisper scattered by a gust of wind: "Don't let it in, don't let it in." Carlos recoiled, his heart pounding wildly, as if trying to escape his chest. But there was no one around, only impenetrable darkness, biting cold, and this man, repeating the same phrase, like a desperate incantation. At that moment, in the depths of the street, where no ray of light penetrated, something stirred, either a shadow, or a sinister figure, something that shouldn't have been there. Carlos faced a difficult decision: help a stranger and face the unknown, or turn away and leave this unsettling encounter in the past. But what would you do in his place? It is on such nights that fateful decisions can determine not only your essence but also who you may become in the future. After learning about such stories, you involuntarily feel discomfort, as if you are standing on the border of the unknown, peering into a frightening abyss, wondering what might be lurking in the answering gaze. This makes you think about the deep aspects of human nature. The most alarming thing is that each of us has faced situations where moral principles have been severely tested, where the decisions made determine how close we come to the dangerous line beyond which darkness begins. What drives people to commit unsavory acts? Evil rarely manifests suddenly, like an explosion. It is rather a gradual, steady destruction of the value system. It all starts with decisions that seem insignificant, turning a blind eye to obvious injustice, justifying dubious actions with the phrase, "It's okay," or simply turning away when you need to act. These moments, which seem trivial, become the bricks from which the bridge to the abyss is built. Philip Zimbardo, in his work, The Lucifer Effect, describes with frightening candor how, under certain circumstances, anyone can become an instrument of evil. And the reason for this is not initial depravity, but the fact that the environment can have an unimaginable impact on us. This is where the power of the environment as a catalyst for evil manifests itself. Imagine a situation similar to the famous Milgram experiment. An authority figure gives an order to perform an action that seems wrong, assuring its necessity and disclaiming responsibility for the consequences. Will there be enough strength to stop? Or will a person be like 65% of the experiment participants, who continue to deliver increasingly strong electric shocks, even when the victims begged for mercy? The surrounding world has an influence on a person that is comparable to an invisible but pervasive force, subtly directing their actions, exerting a manipulative effect, and transforming the personality beyond recognition. A textbook example is the Stanford Prison Experiment, in which ordinary students, endowed with power and a sense of impunity, turned into sadists within a few days. However, the breeding ground for evil is not only the environment but also language, which has a hypnotic power. Words used as weapons can transform the unacceptable into the seemingly necessary. Torture, for example, becomes enhanced interrogation, and genocide is disguised as ethnic cleansing. As a result, what should cause horror begins to seem quite reasonable. If you do not question such narratives, a person risks becoming an accomplice to atrocities, without even realizing it. This dynamic, veiled by polished language and manipulative constructions, persists in modern society. Evil does not always demonstrate its true essence, often hiding under the guise of ordinariness, lurking in everyday routine, and waiting for the right moment to manifest itself. What would happen if we were in Carlos's shoes, face to face with the unknown, feeling the oppressive gaze of the abyss lurking in the twilight? Would we be able to maintain steadfastness, or would we succumb to the fall? After all, in the end, it is not enough to simply be on the edge of the abyss, but to have enough strength to retreat in time. So, we conclude our disturbing journey. We have penetrated into the dark corners of the human consciousness, into the foggy area where good and evil are intertwined in a complex pattern. We have encountered a frightening truth: in each of us lies the potential for both light and dark deeds. The key is not to deny this duality, but to recognize it and be willing to face it openly. The story of Carlos and the Zimbardo experiment are not just separate narratives or scientific concepts, they are mirrors in which we must see our own reflection. They teach us that evil does not always manifest itself in an obvious form but rather arises as a result of the gradual accumulation of minor decisions that, over time, can turn us into someone we never thought we would become. The next time circumstances challenge your moral principles, pause and deeply analyze the situation to make a conscious decision about the kind of person you want to be. It is important to remember that, although the temptation to commit an unsavory act will always exist, falling into the abyss of immorality is not predetermined. Within each of us lies both a dark side, ready to break out, and the potential to perform heroic deeds.